This podcast was created to educate listeners on the experiences of diverse individuals. However, all opinions expressed by the host or guests do not reflect the overall standing of Tarleton Radio or Tarleton State University.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Making Space, a Diversity Dialogue, and I'm your host, Cole. This is a biweekly podcast where together we'll have questions answered about socially sensitive topics while learning how to create lasting relationships with diverse people. In honor of Pride Month, we've decided to go a bit deeper into the LGBTQ plus topics. If you haven't already, please go and listen to our very first episode, The Words Behind the Letters of LGBTQ plus. This episode, we're going to discuss transgender identity, what that is, hot topics revolving around transgender people, as well as how important pronouns are and how we can communicate with this particular group. To assist me today are two trans men, Nicholas Williams and Parker Clemens. Nicholas is currently a student at Tarleton State University. He is studying history with a teaching certificate track. And he has been transitioning medically for about a year and a half now, but has identified as trans since 2010. Parker Clemens is currently studying animal science, and he has been transitioning medically for about the same time, isn't that right? Yeah, about a year and a half. And has been socially transitioned since 2017, I believe.
Yes.
Let's go ahead and, well, y'all say hi.
Hello. How's it going?
All right. So we're going to first start into vocabulary. I'll get into history a little bit later and just do a brief bit of that. But first, we're going to define transgender. And we're going to take that by breaking down the word a little bit. So trans, that beginning, just means across, beyond, through, changing through. If you look up the definition of trans, that portion of the word, it just means across. So if you put those two together, that means moving across the binary spectrum from one side to the other is how you can kind of see it. And if that's a little bit confusing, just means basically transitioning or moving across from one gender to another. Although transgender can be an umbrella term too, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. I do have transsexual on our vocabulary list just because a lot of people have heard that term as well. I know Parker has a little bit of information in regards to that. So is that something that's still regarded as a term? Do people still identify as transsexual, or?
There are definitely people, like individuals, who will still identify as transsexual, but it is not a term that the general public should use, like when referring to trans people. In the probably 60s through 90s, it was a very medicalized term, and there is some trauma behind it in the trans community.
So it's almost like a taken back term in a way.
In a way.
All right. Nicholas, do you have anything to add about transsexual, the term?
The few friends that I have made through this journey, I know one in particular kind of feels like it's, I don't want to say slur, but it has its negative connotations because of the fact that it's perceived as like they're changing their sex.
Right.
Going for that. Really, it's just moving across. But yeah, I don't know.
Just that it can be used in a bad light, in a bad context. So it's probably just better to use transgender unless that person prefers to be referred to as transsexual. Then. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now I mentioned in that definition the binary spectrum, and what that means, you can just visualize a line with female on the far left and male on the far right, and those represent the two extremes of gender, basically, with people being able to identify on that spectrum. So we're thinking about transgender as moving across that binary spectrum. Now, transitioning is a part of being transgender. It's described as a process wherein a transgender individual goes through socially and medically changing to align to their identity. And that has a lot of different things involved with it. Socially, it could be changing the way you present yourself, like changing clothing, changing the things you wear. And then medically, we can go into hormone therapy and surgical transitions and that sort of thing. Now, gender dysphoria. So transitioning assists in gender dysphoria. And gender dysphoria is the feeling of discomfort or stress that occurs when people whose gender identity differs from their sex that is assigned at birth. Did y'all want to try to explain that a little bit? Gender dysphoria and the way you have felt it or understand it? That's okay.
I'm honestly, I'm not sure how to explain my own gender dysphoria. It's just there. It's something
Right.
I haven't always known was there.
Yes.
Yes. I was diagnosed by a.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
It's all right. It was diagnosed by a psychologist. But it's just something. If there was a misalignment, my brain has always known I was male, and it's just there was an uncomfortableness and an imbalance in that.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm transitioning to fix that imbalance.
Okay. Thank you. Nick, did you want to try to give a summary or some sort of explanation? Do you think you feel like you can do that?
I'm kind of on the same page. Like I was never fully comfortable with doing the more female attributed actions, like playing those games. I would rather be doing the other things with the boys. So that's how that's where I kind of rolled with. But my gender dysphoria is also, I guess, physically. And the best way that I can explain it, and I've explained it to my friend Coda, is so when you look in the mirror, most of the time you see what you. I'm in the mirror. There's nothing really matching. Like it doesn't have, but I don't have that, and it kind of sets me back to it just feeling, I guess, wrong is a better way to say it, rather than just be like, no, this isn't. But it's just not comfortable because I shouldn't look like this. I should look like a boy, like what they have.
Okay. So your connection was a little bit bad there, but I think I got the gist of what you're saying. Just that when you look in the mirror, there's something off, there's something missing. And it's just very uncomfortable and unsettling to that. Is that you need something that's not there. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, as I mentioned before, it is a diagnosis listed in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. That's the DSM-5. That's just something to help when transgender individuals go to therapies and stuff like that to assist them in their transition. Now, the contrast to transgender is cisgender, or some people just refer to it as cis, and that is someone whose gender matches their sex. For example, a person who is assigned female at birth and also identifies as a binary woman. And we mentioned that a little bit in the first episode of Making Space, but that's just a reiteration of that. Now, misgendering is another term a lot of people will hear, and that refers to when someone will assume gender based on physical features and use pronouns that don't match that person's true gender identity. And then our next thing we come to is the acronym FTM. can come up a lot, FTM and MTF, when you're looking and educating yourself about transgender identities. And what that just means is FTM is female to male, and then MTF is male to female. So, like an example of male to female, a transgender woman is like Laverne Cox, who a lot of people may have seen in Orange is the New Black. So that's just an example there. And that term is assigned to people like that. Now, we mentioned hormone therapy during transition, the description of transitioning and transition. So there's hormone therapies for transgender women and transgender men. Transgender women generally take E or estrogen. That can be a pill, injection, cream, gel, spray, or patch. And then some transgender women take what's called progesterone, which is a pill or a cream. They'll usually take those in combination. And some of the physical changes that you would see for that is skin changes, breast development, fat redistribution to hips and thighs, the loss of muscle definition, and a slowing down of body hair growth. Now, it doesn't change very incredibly. You have to do it over a long amount of time, and it's usually associated, medical transition is usually associated with also social transition as well, which just means changing like the clothing you wear or getting vocal lessons and stuff like that. For trans men, usually you would have testosterone is what they would take. That's a shot, a gel, a patch, and then some of the changes. Do y'all want to talk about some of the changes that you guys go through taking testosterone?
Our voices deepen.
Okay.
Body hair growth is quite insane.
Now, does it affect your like emotions or anything, or is it just physical changes?
My emotions are definitely different now that I'm on testosterone. Where I would have cried before, I get angry now. Like, it may not be the emotions that are different. My response, the physical response my body has to those emotions are different.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Also, if I miss my shot, I get extremely irritable. There's just things like that. I'm more quick-tempered than I was before. Like I have a much shorter fuse.
Okay. Nick, did you want to share a little bit about your journey with taking hormone therapy and what made you choose like the route you took, like an injection or a patch or a cream?
I do injections, but that's purely because I don't like anything on my skin, or like I don't like the feeling of anything. So the creams and the gel that they use doesn't really help. But I did notice within that first couple of weeks when I was taking it, I noticed the same thing. Instead of crying or getting like super emotional, or I would go through the steps, I would just immediately just straight go into anger and that was weird because I never really experienced. I don't experience emotions in a normal way, so having all of that was like, ooh, that's weird. But oh yeah, the body hair is insane. Look like so straight up Wolfman at the moment.
Yeah, so it's just an extreme, it's pretty extreme, I guess, for you guys to have that difference to even go through.
I'd never really felt anger in the same way before. Like, I will be having a conversation and it's like, I have no reason to be mad right now, and I'm just mad. And I never experienced that before testosterone.
Did either of you can answer this, did either of you have to figure out how, like, did you guys have strategies to kind of deal with that? Or was it just kind of a ball of emotion, or how did you feel in that moment or that span of time where you started?
I did not know that was going to be part of it.
So it was
Like
unexpected.
everybody says, like, everybody's like, like the way you'll hear a lot of trans men who are on testosterone say, I don't cry anymore. I don't do this anymore. Well, I used to cry a lot. It was just like anytime I was happy, sad, whatever the emotion was, I cried. And now I just get frustrated and angry. It's like they completely swapped. And I didn't have a game plan. And honestly, I still don't. It's just how it is now.
Yeah, it's like, I guess I'm just going to be angry for like the next 20 minutes until I'm like, all right, cool, that's over. So
it's just riding it out. Interesting. What an experience. Just to be able to feel as if you are finally okay, you know? Now there's another hormone therapy that comes up sometimes, especially when parents are trying to educate themselves on transgender identities and that sort of thing. There's something called puberty inhibitors or puberty blockers, and that's for younger trans individuals. They can discuss this with guardians taking puberty inhibitors to ease dysphoria. Usually they're just kind of from what I could tell, it's just kind of a holding off of puberty until that individual chooses to either continue with their assigned sex's puberty or start taking those hormones to transition. Did y'all have anything to add to that? Do you know much about puberty inhibitors?
I mean, they're exactly that. Most people in the trans community call them puberty blockers. Mm-hmm. It is literally a pause button.
Yeah.
Like, it's when you have when you have a young person who is maybe not confused, but they're young and they're figuring out their identity. Mm-hmm. You don't want to force, if you can avoid putting a trans person through their assigned sex at birth's puberty, it's a great ability to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. So you can press a pause button, they take a puberty blocker, and then when they're usually 14 through 16, they can start taking the hormone of their gender, not their assigned gender at birth.
Okay.
So like a young trans boy, he could start taking puberty blockers around 10 or 11, and then around 14 to 16 they would put him on testosterone.
Okay.
But if in that time period the child realizes that they're not trans, they can come off of puberty blockers and it will have no difference on their body. They would just start the puberty that their bodies would naturally produce.
I think that's where a lot of heavy discussion is, at least with parents and guardians, is this going to affect their child later? And it's interesting that we can have that sort of hormone therapy where you can just press pause, right? Nick, did you have anything to add to that, or how parents or guardians can respond to using such things?
The only thing I could really do is, like, I don't want to come off as like, no, you have to do the puberty blockers, but like, just, it's a good idea to at least have that option with them, because they are young and they flip-flop back and forth. I mean, they could, like, during the whole thing about being on the puberty blockers, and be like, oh, maybe I'm not transgender, I'm just a non-binary, and then so they can still play, they still have that time to play back and forth. Mm-hmm. And then hopefully when they decide, I heavily suggest using those, definitely when they're that young. That would because I mean, it is terrifying. Like once you get started on this path and you decide like, oh, I don't want to do it because it's not who I am. Once you're past a certain point, there's stuff that won't reverse
Right.
in a
So if
way.
you go straight into hormone therapies, specifically for your gender identity, like testosterone or
Yeah.
estrogen, there's not really much going back for some of those changes.
Yes, and then if they decide, okay, maybe this is not for me, the body can just be like, all right, cool, we're just gonna keep on rolling,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's
And
no disruption. I guess is the
yeah, that's good. And I'll make sure to include some resources in the description, especially if we're looking at if listeners out there, if you're parents or guardians of, or just family members of a young person who is thinking about that, then I'll include some resources for you guys to look at. Now we're going to move into some other forms of transitioning that's going to be more socially transitioning and some other aspects. But there's also for trans men or FTM individuals, there's binding, which just means binding the chest, and then there's prosthetics that they can use. That can be for trans women or trans men. Even cutting your hair can be a form of transition. I know, Parker, you mentioned you had mentioned on here, but you cut your hair pretty soon after you came out as a trans man, right?
Yeah. Honestly, I probably cut my hair a little later than most people after they come out as trans. Because I only came out to my friend group. And so it was probably 2.5, almost 3 months after I came out that I still had very long hair that I hid. I would tuck it up into beanies. I would just try to hide it before I finally made the chop. And I think I went back to the same person with like 3 times in 1 week. Because I cut it off and then I cut it shorter and then I cut it even shorter before I was like, okay, like this is where I want it. And now I'm even way shorter than it was then. But that was probably my first haircut. And I told the hairdresser like what was going on. It was a very freeing moment.
Yeah.
Like
just a weight
that was a big deal. Yeah.
Nick, what was your first kind of, besides your medical transition for hormone therapy and that, what was your first forms of transitioning? Was it cutting your hair, changing your clothes?
I've always worn more masculine clothes. It's a lot. The texture on them is a lot better than most women's clothing. But no, mine was the same. Before I started seeing my therapist, I've always been very hot, and so when I decided to go ahead and take this plunge that yes, I was going to transition, I was like, this will make me feel better. Plus, I won't have to be hot anymore. So like, and like, all right, here we go. And like, as soon as they went up the back of my head with the clippers, I was like, okay, this is me. This is how I'm gonna be. And like that first look in the mirror once my haircut was over, and I saw how the shape made me look, I was like, yeah, that's me. That's who I am. Okay, cool.
It's great. Such an affirming kind of thing to happen.
Heck yeah. And then I just moved on to binders, and then like that was seeing my what's that word called? Not chest? Silhouette. Shape. Yeah, shape. Yeah. The shape of my when I had the binder on and I saw it and I turned and I saw how flat I was, because I mean I'm big, so like I'm not gonna be like super flat, but like having that more masculine shape.
I feel that.
I cried. I straight up cried in the mirror. I was like, oh, this is like the best thing ever. Like, couldn't get over it.
It's not a small thing, even if it's not a medical sort of transition. Just using those elements, it's a huge part, right? Of taking away that dysphoria and that discomfort and that unsettling feeling. That's great. And
Uh,
for any listeners who are thinking about it and thinking maybe this applies to me, I know binders can be for non-binary people and trans men, binders can be difficult. Are there some tips that you recommend?
Definitely take your measurements and definitely double check them once you take your own measurements while trying to match it up with the online size chart. And if you read an article that says go up, always do, just in case.
Mm-hmm.
Because
it can be pretty dangerous, right?
Yeah, putting that smaller one on and you wearing it like that and knowing that like it's tight and it's squeezing and it hurts, like, is bad.
Mm-hmm.
The bruising and the breathing, like especially with the breathing, yeah, no, don't go small. Always go bigger. If you're not sure, go big first, and then you can, like, okay, this one's too big, maybe the next size, and then hopefully you get a place will be like, all right, well, we'll send it back, we'll get you a different one. Hopefully you'll find one that's really good.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
When I first got my first binder, I definitely made that mistake. I got like two maybe three sizes too small. And I wore that for probably a year, and my ribs are funny shaped now.
Okay,
like,
so
I have
don't
a
follow
real
when
weird
you're
bow and
don't follow
exactly.
in your
Just go. It's going to be uncomfortable, but you're going to need a friend to measure you, because it's very difficult to do yourself. And honestly, just if you can keep your eyes closed, your eyes closed, have a friend do it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll completely. I mean, it doesn't completely take it away, but it will help immensely. To not have to visualize what's going on.
Yeah, because you're not seeing them look at you like this, or like how you are while they're trying to measure you, is the best way that I did it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Now moving on to our next definition, we kind of got a little sidetracked there, but that's important. And for anyone or any listeners, or even any friends of transgender individuals, just do your research. That's important. There's lots of do's and don'ts out there, and it can be a little dangerous, especially when you're considering binding. It's important to do your research and take what they said in mind. So our next term that we want to look at is gender nonconforming. Now, what I have here is a person's gender expression that doesn't fit inside traditional male or female categories. Some examples of that could be agender, bigender, genderqueer. Even cross-dressers and drag queens and kings can be considered gender nonconforming. And technically that's under the umbrella of transgender identities, but some people consider it its own kind of umbrella term. And non-binary is another one.
Because not every gender non-conforming person
is trans, right?
Is trans. Yes. Okay. Yes.
Okay, so exactly. not every gender non-conforming person.
Make sure that's covered.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. So non-binary is an individual who does not identify with either binary, male or female, or even some non-binary folks feel as if they aren't directly in the middle or even on the binary spectrum. They would just kind of prefer to leave gender out of it. So that's something else too. But a lot of the times, non-binary people, especially those who are assigned female at birth, will use certain forms of transitioning, like binding and prosthetics, and social transitioning, like cutting your hair or the way you dress. Okay, is there anything else y'all wanted to add to non-binary or gender non-conforming that I missed? Or are we going to move on to history? All right, we'll move on to history now. As we mentioned in our LGBTQ plus words behind the letters episodes, that's the first one. If you guys haven't listened to it, you ought to. And while the term transgender was not widely used until the 1970s, what we consider modern transgender identities have been around for a very long time. It's not something that's new. I have an example here is a lot of records of a third gender in many nations of indigenous people. They have a lot of record of that, often called two-spirit in modern times. The reason these identities and orientations seem as if they've become almost a trend or become more popular can be attributed to like globalization and mass media and mass communication methods like social media. People are just able to see what's happening all over the world, and it's more prevalent in what we look at every day. So it's not necessarily that it's a trend. It's something that has been around forever, but it's something we see more now just because of technology. In more recent history, if we look at physical and hormonal transition methods, the first successful sex reassignment operation for a transgender woman was accomplished approximately in like 1952 or 53. I couldn't find an exact date, but her name was Christine Jorgensen. She had hormone therapy as well as the sexual reassignment operation. And that was pretty big in the United States because she came back and she became a celebrity because she was originally a soldier, and she fought in World War II. Now, the first successful sex reassignment operation for a transgender man, that's FTM, if we go back to our definitions, was accomplished around the same time. It was like 1958, I believe. And that was on a physician named Michael Dillon. And he was pretty cool. He, like I said, he was a physician, but he actually ended up staying kind of isolated right after his transition up in the mountains, and decided he didn't really want anyone else telling his story for a long time, so we don't hear much from him until the later dates. A few important transgender individuals in LGBTQ plus history are Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. These were the women credited for starting the Stonewall riots, which also started the LGBTQ plus rights movement, at least the main riot that started everything off, or it was popular or acknowledged. More recognizable names for transgender people now are people like Laverne Cox, Chaz Bono, Jazz Jennings, Isis King, and more other people. I think we're going to go ahead, since we covered the history pretty quick, we're going to go into other questions for you guys. Now, understanding that people likely have different experiences because not everyone is the same, not everyone grew up the same. How does someone know that they're trans? This is a question that has come up quite a lot in my research, is like, how does someone know that they're trans? Nick, do you want to take this one first?
I didn't know specifically that I was trans. I just knew that I was different, that I definitely wasn't a normal girl. I actually didn't even know that the word transgender even existed until my first year of college, when I met some of my friends. That was about 2010, when I was like, okay, this is who I am. Now I have a word for it.
Okay, so it's not like a hard thing you can really identify. It's a feeling.
Where when I was a kid, I just thought I was a boy.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
so
I didn't know.
You didn't even associate yourself with assigned female.
Yeah, like all my friends were boys. I was just one of the boys. until puberty. And then I was pretty much told, hey, it's time to grow out of this. And I was like, grow out of what? And then I made a very big switch, like, in my brain, and I was like, oh, because I identified as a lesbian, and I was like, I'm going to be a high femme lesbian because I wanted absolutely nothing to do with masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wanted nothing to do with masculinity because I was trying really hard to be quote unquote normal. When in reality, I'm just a straight man.
So you still like women, but you are a man, right?
Yes, okay. Yes, I'm. And it took getting to college and getting into Tarleton's GSA, which is the Tarleton's Gay Straight Alliance, to really realize and go, okay, yeah, this is what I am. These are these are the words that match the things I've been feeling forever.
Mm-hmm. So it's really just also identifying terms.
Find the bravery to come out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So like identifying those terms. And
a lot of it is putting terms with feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So we mentioned misgendering in definition in our vocabulary list, but I have a question down here. Is misgendering a trans person bad? And is there a time where it is bad or isn't? One of y'all can jump in on that.
So you never want to misgender anybody. You never want to misgender anybody, like, on purpose. But at the same time, at least in my understanding with most trans people, especially in the beginning of your medical transition or before your medical transition, you're going to get misgendered. Unfortunately, it's part of life. You can either learn to correct people. I've never been good at correcting people. I'm sort of the belief that I'm never going to see these people again. I'll only correct you if I see you being a part of my life for a long period of time. But if a stranger misgenders me, I'm just usually going to walk the other direction, and like it can't completely ruin my day. But purposely misgendering a trans person is considered violence. You are purposely causing harm to these people if it comes out of a place of hate after you've been corrected, and that's wrong.
Nick, did you have something to add?
I completely agree. Like, if you're purposely misgendering somebody, then that's just bad. Like, don't do that. That's
after someone has corrected you, and they purposefully call you the wrong pronouns.
And they purposely do it. Now there's lots of ways to go about it. If it's a stranger that's doing it, I mean, like Parker said, like, I'm not never see that person. All right, well, it's their business. If it's like a friend or a family member that's continuing to do it after I've corrected them and explained to them why I don't like it, that's hurtful, because you're not taking how I feel into this. Like, you're just, well, you're affecting me, so I'm just going to keep calling you what you are or what you look like, and you're just going to have to deal with it. Be like, no, don't do that. And it can be really negative. It can be really triggering to some people. And
right. I was going to ask you guys, what is it? Can you try to explain the feeling of when someone misgenders you? Like, how does that affect you when they say things like that?
The best way I can do it is if you take a piece of foil and you crumple it, and then you try and stretch it out and smooth it, it's never going to be smooth again. And so, yeah, and eventually, you'll get over yourself and you'll start, using the correct term that you're supposed to be using when you're talking to me or talking about me. But that damage is already done. Because now I know that you'll never come around. You'll never see me as who I am. You're just gonna see who you've always seen, and
it's just kind of a hurt that they see you as someone who you're not.
Yeah, and that's a hurt that's always gonna stay. That's never gonna. There's no fixing that.
Yeah.
We take so much as trans people, so much time to figure out who we are and to try in the best way to explain to the people who matter to us, like, hey, this is me. I'm not doing this for fun. And this is super important. And it is so painful when somebody you love refuses to use your correct pronouns, to use your correct name. But even just like random people in public, like, it hurts. Even if we're not going to correct you, it hurts. It's invalidating. It's dysphoria is the definition of dysphoria includes the word distress for a reason.
So misgendering
like
causes distress.
Yes, and it takes a lot of self-reflection and honestly, usually a therapist, to get through a lot of this of the internal turmoil, and to have people that don't know you just constantly saying you're this, you're this, you're this, when you know you're not, hurts a lot.
Yeah, so you're like, am I not presenting myself enough to where you're still identifying me as a different gender? Am I not doing enough? What am I doing wrong? Wow. So I will say that because I am starting to get more comfortable with who I am, that this is who I am. So for the most part, I kind of brush it off. But I have a few friends that just get furious on my own behalf whenever I'm misgendered. And the best part is when if I'm at like a fast food restaurant and I'm talking to the box, and with medical transitioning, yeah, my voice will deepen, but it won't get like that same baritone, and sometimes it might come across as more feminine. So I kind of get like a sadistic, happy feeling knowing that, yeah, you can call me ma'am to the box, but when I pull up to the window,
you have a full beard, like
I have a full beard going on. That just makes me look kind of silly.
Yeah.
But I do have friends that just get outright furious over it, which is good.
Yeah, because it's causing you pain, and I'm sure that's hard to see.
Yes.
Right. All right. Now this is another question that I have. How often do you guys get misgendered, or has that changed since you started transitioning, medically or socially? There's a lot of thought happening.
When I first came out as trans, I was out as trans for, I don't know, maybe almost 2 years after coming out. Or after coming out, there was almost 2 years between that and me starting testosterone.
Okay.
And so pretty much that entire time I was misgendered. Like, there was no questioning it. My voice was really high. My face was extremely round and like soft. I'm also 4'9". You put all those together,
right?
And
it doesn't
people
change
don't.
Your height.
No.
It does.
Not when your growth plates are closed.
Right. It does, however, change your foot size, is what I was researching. For trans women, the muscles in their feet change.
My feet have gone up like 3 sizes. My feet have gone up 3 sizes since I started testosterone.
I think that's so interesting.
I went from a 4 to a 7.
Yeah, so unfortunately it doesn't change that, but it does change some things that help. But do you all see a difference as far as getting misgendered now that you have started medically transitioning?
So I don't work in a field where I deal with people very much anymore. So since I don't talk to people, I don't get misgendered anymore. Just sort of how it is. And I honestly can't tell you the last time like the outside of my family, just like a random person in public misgendered me.
Well, that's nice.
But again, I also have not talked to people.
Right.
Quarantine is happening.
Correct. Right. At the time of the recording, it's just the end of quarantine for us in Texas anyway. Nick, did you have anything to add?
So at the beginning, I was the same. Like, there was nothing I could really do. Like, I looked, sounded feminine. Like, there's nothing I could do about it. But it wasn't until my beard started growing in did people actually start giving me the correct gender. And it was actually really funny because I was like, you know what, I'm gonna put a stop to this. So I bought a button that had my pronouns on it. Yeah, that didn't help. But because I work in customer service, so most of the time people just go by like your body size. So it's like, all right, that looks like a feminine body, let's go with that. So it was always she and her. And then when I would turn around, they would almost backpedal. They're like, oh, I'm sorry, sir. And then I didn't get the full gratification of it happening, and then how I was getting presented or how I was presenting until I actually had a lady come back the next day looking for me to apologize. Because she kept calling me ma'am, and while I had my button on at work, and she came back and she's like, I just want to let you know that I'm really sorry. I have a child who is trans, so I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to be better, and I just want to apologize for misgendering you, because now that I see your button, or I saw your button,
she understood.
She understood. And she's like, and you look wonderful, by the way. And I was like, thank you. But
yeah,
but that is extremely sweet.
Yeah, you don't see that.
No, yeah. And then it happens every so often. I'll get a person that would be like, oh, excuse me, ma'am, and then I'll turn around and they're like, oh, no, I'm sorry, sir. Or they would be like, ooh, ma'am, sir, ma'am. I was like, no, you're correct, it's sir. And they're like, oh, okay. Yeah.
That sounds uncomfortable.
Yes. Yeah, it is. And I want to feel bad because they messed up.
That is truly one of the most uncomfortable parts of transitioning for me, is the whole ma'am, sir, ma'am thing. And I'm like, you were right at sir. Stop there, please. Yeah. Now my funniest story about getting gendered correctly, people tend to think I'm like a 12, 14-year-old like boy. And I'm like, I'm 22. I'm allowed to buy alcohol here. Like, man, I have not lost my parents. I'm just here by myself. But I get that one a lot. Like,
you're
I'm
young.
a kid. I had a guy tell me at Staples that didn't grow. Like, he was like, yeah, I didn't really start growing my beard until I was probably 18 or 19. And I was like, oh God, I'm 21. He thought I was like a 15-year-old kid. And that's a really common, like, universal trans guy experience.
Is getting told you're a child.
Yeah, I mean, it's the fountain of youth. Just being trans, being a trans man.
Yeah. My friend Coda is actually really jealous because he's like, look at Nick. It's like, I kind of feel like my crew knows, but like they don't want to say it. They're kind of being respectful. But like those in the little circle around us at work know, because like I explain and try to like educate people. He's like, look at Nick. Nick gets his beard out of a bottle, and it looks better than the myths that
That's
have been
funny.
growing for years. And I'm like, thanks. It took me like 5 months.
I wish.
All right. Well, let's move on to some of the other questions. But I'm glad to hear those stories and get that out there. So these are going to be a bit harder, at least tougher for people. I'm sorry. How do you feel as a transgender man? How do you guys feel using the bathroom in public? I know that's a huge thing. It's a huge hot button topic for transgender identities, is the bathroom. How do y'all feel using the bathroom in public?
I usually don't use the bathroom in public unless there's a single stall. But I also have a service dog.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right,
so
'cause you were
even
in our
if I
service dog.
wanted to, I couldn't use a urinal. I'd have to go into a stall. Yes. And so I always have an excuse to go to the stall in the men's restroom. So if I ever do go into the men's restroom, I will only go if I have my dog with me.
Mm-hmm.
But I rarely don't. I mean, I rarely do. I usually just wait till I get home.
Why is that?
Safety. I'm a very small person, and people get really mad when they think you're in the wrong restroom.
Oh, so it's a fear and danger kind of situation.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Now, I will say, men in the men's restroom usually pay very little attention to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's not much, like, you don't make eye contact, you don't have small talk. So if you do go to the men's restroom, just keep your head down. Like, keep your head down, go in, get out.
I see. Nick, did you have something to add as far as going to the bathroom in public?
I have a slight fear of going to the bathroom, but that's because I've moved, so I don't know the area that great. I don't know how to perceive people or watch people, and so when I go into the bathroom, I look for feet because I keep my head down.
Right.
I see how many pairs of feet are in the bathroom, and I go, and then that's usually when I go. If there's like one person, it's like, okay, I can go. Then I immediately go into the stall and I leave once I finish and wash my hands.
Mm-hmm.
When I moved, I actually moved with a friend, and I would be like, hey, can you come check the bathroom for me? Because he knew.
Yeah.
He knew, so I would be like, hey, I need you to come check the bathroom for me, and he would let me know if there's anybody else in there. But I don't. So where I work, we have a bathroom for the associates. I don't use it. I usually go to the bigger bathrooms, and that's so I don't get if somehow there's an associate that has a problem with me because of who I am, I don't want the off chance of being in a closed room with them. So I use the bigger bathrooms, or I'll use the family bathrooms. But the fear is just more so of just like I don't want to be alone more than their outright anger.
Right. The danger sorry, go ahead, Parker.
I was just going to say, I've definitely had people follow me into the men's restroom. And I've had to text friends that I was with and be like, hey, something's going on. Like, he's waiting outside the stall. And there's like other stalls open. And those, I'll just wait it out. I don't care if I'm in there for like an hour.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not coming out. And I think that's where I think that's a lot really where my fear comes from. Like, there are little personal experiences like that.
So getting from your stories and stuff like that, it seems as if the real danger in public bathrooms is to you guys. It's from other people, right? So I know a big topic when we talk about public bathrooms is other people's fear that it might be taken advantage of. But from your stories, at least, we can kind of see it's you who really have the fear and being in danger in that aspect.
Yeah. Because like I don't know how that other person is gonna act once they see me. So there's definitely like a reading the room in a way kind of feeling. So
Right.
Especially if you're alone.
Right, you're right. All right, let's try to get through some more of these questions because I know we're getting close to time. So let's go with, this is a question that a lot of people have, especially in regards to transition, is do all transgender people get the surgeries? I don't think I actually mentioned the surgeries before, but there's, for trans men, there's top surgery and bottom surgery. And then for trans women, I think there's similar to the same thing. But what do you guys think? Do all transgender people have surgeries? Do all trans people want surgeries?
No.
Yeah, it's by a personal choice. There's some people who only do the medical, where they take the hormones and that's it. And then there's people whose dysphoria is really bad, so they take those measures to alleviate that pressure and that feeling on them, and that's completely valid. Like there's people who get, there's men who get top surgery but they don't get the bottom surgery. And then there's people who, especially those who get hysterectomies. I know that wasn't one of the surgeries that you mentioned, but because someone eventually, if they're comfortable and their partner agrees, and it's all aboard the same thing, they'll they can get off their hormones, they can have families, and then they get back on the families. Right. But then there's some where the treatment, I guess, affects it or makes it a little worse. I had a friend who had to have one because everything was going wrong. Not wrong, but like it was making everything a little worse. Right. But no, some people choose not to have the surgeries, and some do. It's just a matter of preference. Okay. That's valid. They're all valid. Everybody valid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I just want to add something really quick. You said that there's top and bottom surgeries. There are also facial feminization and masculinization surgeries where they will go in and put implants or different plastic surgeries. There's body masculinization where they'll go in and they'll shave down different bones to make your hips smaller. Wow. Or with trans women, they'll do implants to make their hips larger. There's a lot of trans people mix and match to whatever fits the image that they want to see themselves as.
I see. Okay. So it's really based on the person and their forms of dysphoria and stuff like that.
Yes.
All right. Let's go into names a little bit. I have a couple of questions regarding names. Why do trans people change their name from their birth name? Why do y'all have? I mean, y'all have experience with that. So.
I do. So my birth name is, well, first of all, my birth name does not exist on anything other than all the other people who have that name. But also because it is chosen to strictly do, I guess, females, or women who are female birth, anyways. It linked it to my past gender, to my birth gender. So in a way, changing my name was like that final like, yes, I am a man, and now I have a male name, and there's no going back. Like, this is who I am. This is my fresh start as who I'm
Right.
supposed to be.
Now, is it offensive for people to ask your birth name?
Yes. I don't know what else to add to that. It's definitely private information. It's like going in and asking somebody their entire medical history.
I see.
That's not yours to know.
Okay.
It's private information that most trans people don't want to share with the world. I mean, there are some trans people who are okay with people knowing their legal name or past name. Are we using the word dead name in this?
It's on my list of questions. Is dead name? Like, why is it called a dead name? Where did that come from? That sort of thing. So if you want to explain that, go ahead.
Well, I know personally the word dead name doesn't offend me, but I know there's a lot of trans people who don't use the word dead name.
Okay.
I don't know the reasoning behind that. I've just briefly heard part of a conversation that was like, yeah, we don't use that here. And I was like, okay. I mean, if it makes other trans people uncomfortable, then we shouldn't use it in trans spaces.
Okay. I did not know that.
But I had always heard the term dead name, like when I was transitioning, am transitioning. I know a lot of young trans people use the word dead name.
Okay. And that's just referring to your birth name or legal name, correct?
Yeah. We can't really say legal name because trans people legally change their names.
Right.
And then that name just no longer exists.
So I suppose
like
birth
my
name.
legal name is my birth name. But once it is changed, it will no longer exist to
Okay.
it will just be done.
I see.
And at that point, nobody else will ever need to know it.
Yeah. That was probably the most freeing part. Is when I got my judge's approval, and I was like, yes.
Just that final kind of like stamp of, okay, no one has to know anymore. It's just a part of your life that you prefer not to think about anymore.
Yeah.
How would you guys prefer people to approach your name and pronouns? If they're just meeting you, or if they're friends and you think you're going to know them for a long time, how would you want people to approach you as far as that's concerned?
As any other dude or bro, because like I identify as male, I look male, so I'm Nicholas and my pronouns are he him. Now if I so choose to tell that person my story and that I am transgender and like this, then I would just be like, hey, like, now that you know my story, it would be really cool if you just continued on referring to me with male pronouns.
Parker, did you have anything to add? I know a lot of people, some people have talked, especially in like the diversity and inclusion type field, that maybe we should just use like neutral pronouns, like they, them, before you meet someone until they tell you. I don't know. Go ahead and let us know. Do you want to take that, Parker? Sorry.
And again, this is from my own personal opinion about my own experience.
Right.
I'm not speaking for any other trans person right now. I don't want to be seen as a trans person. I want to be seen as a man.
I see.
And so it needs to be, first off, I probably won't be meeting somebody without other of my friends or my partner with me. And then when my friends refer to me as he, that is what the stranger that I'm meeting should do also.
I see. Okay.
It should
kind of pay attention to context.
Yeah, I don't ever want it. I don't like walking up to people and being like, hi, my name's Parker and my pronouns are he, him. Or hi, you know, that unless I'm in a like diversity and inclusion scenario, like if I'm in a room that was like a safe space for LGBT people, then I will do that, but not in day-to-day conversation.
Right. Okay, so it's more of if you're someone, you're just meeting someone, maybe pay attention to how other people refer to them and just kind of go with the context and eventually maybe ask or build a relationship with that person.
Yeah.
I mean, if somebody doesn't know and they respectfully ask, that's one thing. But I don't ever want to be expected to like tell somebody my pronouns, or because I feel like it immediately outs me as other. Because like, when does a cis man who's meeting new people go, hi, my pronouns are he, him, and this is my name?
Yeah.
It doesn't really fit into our society's conversation naturally.
Right. So until that it is natural or isn't, then like as it is now, it's not a normalized situation to just do that. So a respectful ask of a question is a good idea, or just paying attention to context around it. Now, let's go over this really quick. How has your transition affected your family and friends? This is my second to last question, and I'll let you guys go. But how did your transition affect your family and friend relationships? Either one of you can take that first.
My relationship with my friends, the ones at my university, they all knew. But my friends that were back home, who most of them knew my family, have honestly, most of them have the ties have been cut. And that wasn't a painful situation because I wasn't close to any of them. But my family, there's some pretty big, there's a pretty big separation now. I mean, they're still my family. They're still my parents. I will always love them. I think somewhere in them, they will always love me. But they don't agree with who I am. And I can't have, like, weighing me down any longer. So, like, separations have been made. It's probably not a normal parent-child relationship for a 20-year-old college student.
So it's difficult. And in transitioning, you have a difficult road for yourself, but also your family. Nick, did you want to add anything?
Thankfully, I've had a good experience with telling people. The only person, so the relationship with my mother has been rocky because of this whole thing. My brother, who I was close to, was probably about the worst thing, because when I told him about it, he immediately went to my mother and was like, no, I'm not supporting that. I'm not going to talk to them anymore because of it. And, you know, it kind of felt, I kind of not violated, but like it felt rude.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he didn't want to come to me and like voice it and like have me explain a little better. He just automatically just was like, no. Now, my father, on the other hand, I was absolutely terrified of him because of me coming out, because of his past actions. So I took him to dinner.
It's always a good idea to do it in
breakup.
public.
Yes. So I told him, and the feedback I got from him was probably the best outcome I could get, because he was like, you know what? I don't understand. I'm going to try to understand. I won't tell you right now that, he's like, I might not accept it. But if you're happy, then I'm going to be happy, and I'm going to support you no matter what, because your happiness comes first. And I was like, all right, cool. But since then, and a few therapy sessions later, he is now on board. So that's good.
Yeah, so there are good experiences.
Yes. But that's and it's always good to have those little things. While I wish other people had the same positive outcome, I know it doesn't always happen.
Mm-hmm.
But family is always gonna be hard.
Right, especially in the LGBTQ plus community, it is difficult, right?
Because they've known you so long as this person, and now you're this whole new person, and they don't know how to go about it. But if it's better for you to separate yourself from them, then you got to take care of yourself first. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So.
All right, my last question for you guys, and then we'll do our closing. But what can listeners do to be better allies, or be better friends, or even family members to transgender people? What do you guys suggest?
Honestly, people did their own research.
Okay, so like listening to our podcast.
Yeah. Like, there are resources out there. The person who has come out to you as trans is not Google. They are not there to teach you everything you need to know. They're not there to teach you how to be respectful of them. But also, if people didn't make our transition about themselves, we're not doing it to hurt somebody. We're not doing it to rebel against our parents. It's us. Like, it's all, we're the same exact person that we've ever been. We're more ourselves now than we were before.
Right.
And if people would.
I think we may have lost Parker's audio. I'm sorry. Can you say that again?
Say what again?
That you're more yourself now, I think, is what you were saying, and that people should try to educate themselves.
That's pretty much it. Like, if people if they take the time to research things on their own, and before they respond with anger when we tell them,
right,
if they can learn before they respond, like, they could take some time, it would help the entire experience, theirs and ours, with our transition.
Nick, did you have anything to add to that?
No, not really. I mean, and also, other than research, just listen. I'm learning we in the community are learning at the same pace as they are. Since there's a whole lot of research going on, but and to be a better ally, I would have to say, other than research, is just to listen to what I have to say. Because like Parker said, I'm doing this for me. So if I'm going to tell you that, hey, this is what's going on, what I would really not happen is be like, oh, well, I read this in this article, that this is what's happening. Well, that's fine for that person that wrote that article, but that's not what's happening to me. That's not going to work for me. That's my major thing is,
Okay.
other than research, just listen.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you both for giving your experiences, because I know it's not easy to just tell people about this kind of thing. But thank you. All right. So listeners, we went over a lot of information and there's a lot of material out there. Again, I'm going to link quite a bit of resources in the description for people who are allies, friends, family, as well as people who think maybe this relates a lot to you and you want to learn more about transgender identity. Now, if you want to learn more about the show or if you want updates about Making Space, you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at the Planet 100.7. We're also on Twitter. That's the radio station we're based out of, at the Planet 100.7. And stay tuned for next week. We're going to do some stuff about protesting and systematic racism. So that's going to be really interesting to hear from a few people who have organized protests and spoke at protests. So that's going to be fun. Until next time, be safe out there, folks, and take care. Bye, guys.